Welcome, Charlie. Welcome, Diane.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, we'll start in just a few minutes.
Great. I did this on my own too.
Good.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. You're
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check, mic check.
Hello.
So Bill, are you Greta? Bill Buchanan?
Hi, David. No, I'm
Okay.
part Greta.
Part Greta. Got it.
As far as I know, Sylvia Starkey will
Got it.
present
Okay.
and then
I'm here,
ask
yeah.
that I share. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Wait one more minute to see if we do have a quorum. So I'll just wait one more minute to make sure we have nobody else joining us. I heard from everybody, so I'm not sure. Maybe they're having issues getting on, but well, good afternoon, everyone. David Cook, I think everybody's met me before, but I'm the KD staff liaison for the local school board members advisory council. There's Larry. Welcome today to this, the first time we met with you all virtually. We have been doing it with all the different advisory councils over the last several weeks as we make our way through the quarantine closure for COVID-19. I'm really happy that you all are here today. We have a pretty packed agenda to go through. I think I just wanted to remind you, first of all, that the meeting is being recorded so we can get it out to folks who aren't able to join us live. Jody Dempsey from my staff is also on the call, and she is keeping notes that will be sent out to you later, as well as a whole bunch of folks from the Department of Education, some of whom are going to be presenting to you a little bit later. Let me get my stuff situated here. There we go. So the first thing we're going to do in just a minute is do a roll call of the members. The way we do that in a virtual meeting is I will call your name. And then if your camera is not on, and I think Sherry may not have, she may just be with us from an audio perspective, but if you have a camera, please turn it on and then announce you're here or I'm here or whatever you're going to do. So that's sort of our visual way of knowing that you are you and you are here. So we'll do that in just a minute. Then we will just go quickly through to get the approval of last month's notes, minutes, summary minutes, which will then become permanent at that point. And then Commissioner Brown will give his introduction. Welcome to you all. And then we have several topical items for you to go through and an opportunity for you to provide feedback at the end. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to call out, let me pull up my participant list too so I can see it. Call out your name, and as I said, before you answer, if you could make sure your camera is on, and then say here once you know that's true. And if I can't see you, I will actually let you know that I can't see you, and you can at that point. So first is Diane Berry.
Here.
Okay. Larry Dotson.
Here.
Larry, you got a camera? Are you? I'm not seeing. Yeah. So let me see.
Camera's turned on.
Okay. Let me do something while I'm going to stop presenting my screen. That might help me too.
It's
Okay. Go ahead. Say that again, Larry, just so I'll just say you're here again.
Here.
Okay. Thank you. Is Christina Dressler here? Is Linda Duncan on the line? Okay. Julia Fisher. I know Joanna is because we talked on the phone a second ago.
I'm here.
Thank you, Joanna. Sherry Robinson, I also spoke to you. I think you're here. She muted. Well, Sherry was there. I don't know what happened. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry about this, folks. This is what happens sometimes when you're doing. There we go. All right. Sherry, are you here? Are you with us, Sherry Robinson? She's talking. Oh, wait a minute. David Webster.
I'm here.
Thank you. Carl Wicklund.
Present.
And Charlie Wise. I know Charlie's on the call. He may be muted. That's the other logistical thing I should tell you folks. If you
Here. Did you get me then?
Yeah,
right.
I did.
My
You
mic
hover-
was off.
That's
Sorry.
right. That's okay. If you hover towards the middle to the bottom of your screen, there'll be a bar that'll come up that has a microphone and a video camera on it, and you can click those on and off as you need to. With a small group like this, I think it's okay for everybody to leave their cameras on. Sometimes we have folks to turn them off just because it can be a bandwidth kind of drainage if everybody has their camera on. But for right now, we'll just go ahead and leave those on. I'm going to pop back into my presentation deck. So there we go. All right. So you should have received, and if I think I sent it to you all as part of previous thing I sent out to you all, the meeting minutes from the last. Let me share that with you on the screen. Does anybody have any questions and or comments about the meeting minutes from the last meeting? If not, we'll do the same thing we just did with the roll call. Could I, one by one, just have you, well, first of all, could I have somebody give me a motion to accept the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
Motion.
I make the motion. that we
Diane
accept-
makes a motion, and I think Joanne was the second.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll do the same thing a little bit differently than, well, if, I think everybody just all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. So I'm going to now turn it over to Interim Commissioner Kevin Brown for a welcome to you all.
Thank you, David. Thank you all for joining us. As you know, we originally scheduled, I think, your meeting to be later in the summer, but we thought bringing you back was certainly necessary and appropriate under the circumstances we're in. We really want some feedback from you, particularly as we get into, and you'll see from the agenda, talking about summer learning options that districts may choose to utilize. Also understanding there are still a lot of problems and barriers to doing some of these things. And then, of course, the big question is, what's it going to look like when we return to school? All those things I know you're talking about locally with your boards. We really want to know how you're feeling and what barriers you're seeing there locally. And then, of course, there's a CARES Act funding update. You'll be having an inflow of federal funds into your districts within the next few days. We anticipate as a result of the CARES Act. And then, of course, mental health issues that we've been discussing with all of the advisory groups. We all, I think, need to pay attention to our own mental health. And Dr. Sweeney does a good job of helping us stay grounded when he does these, but also, of course, keeping in mind the mental health and social emotional health of our staff and students, most importantly. And then, of course, have an open discussion and feedback. Before we get into the agenda, it's a very hefty agenda. I think there's going to be a lot of interest in all of it, and we'll probably take the full 2 hours. I won't belabor my remarks, but I do want to thank all of you and board members from across the state. It has been, I think history will show an amazing coming together in Kentucky. And it's not been as easy in other states, and it's not been easy in Kentucky, but we've all come together to have a full school year. In Kentucky, we're going to have a full minimum term of 1,062 hours using non-traditional instruction. Now, that's far from perfect. The non-traditional instruction has some flaws. It was never designed to go week after week for 6 to 8 weeks at a time, but it's the only platform we have, and we're using it. It's easy sometimes to think, well, other states must be doing something similar to us, and there are some states doing something similar. There are also a lot of states that are just calling it quits and saying non-traditional instruction is too tough. And the words "too tough" was in a headline in the Wall Street Journal last week, because districts in Georgia, I think Washington, D.C., and some other places were saying, we're just throwing our hands up. It's too hard. It's too tough. We're not going to do it. And it is tough. And we know we've got exhaustion out there. We've got burnout from students, parents, and teachers. But the point is that we are still attempting to educate kids, doing the best we can. And that's a testament to what I call the Kentucky education community, which is made up of school board members, superintendents, teachers, everyone, students and parents. And it's really been amazing of what we're doing. And all that work's being done there at the local level. And then I do also, David Cook, I've not given a shout out to you publicly, but I want to do so. You've been an unsung hero in all this. David has been behind the scenes for several years, getting the NTI process, trying to perfect it. And sure enough, and of course, we've had success with it with about 83 districts before we hit the pandemic. Well, sure enough, boy, we had to all come online, and we got 172 districts on NTI platform within about 5 days. It's been truly amazing. It's a testament to David's office, his limited staff, to be able to pull this off and continue offering guidance to districts. So, David, I don't think I've done so because we've been so busy, but that's no excuse. I want to thank you for everything that you and your staff have done over NTI. It's remarkable. And again, and I recognize far from perfect, but I really think that there's some amazing things going on out there that we can celebrate. And knowing we've got challenges, of course, ahead as well. Kids we're still not reaching. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, David.
All right. Thank you,
And
Kevin.
I will
and
be
thank
here
you.
for the entire meeting. If I have my camera off, that may mean I ran to get a cup of water, but I am going to be here for the entire meeting. We'll be listening and obviously here for questions.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for those kind words. Yes, and I'll just continue the shout out to my small but mighty team who has worked very hard to get folks up and running and then to keep them running during this time. So we appreciate that. All right, so I'm just going to continue on and get us to the right spot in our agenda. And Amanda, you're up first. You and Kelly are up first to talk to us about summer learning.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be here. I'm sorry my camera is not on. I am having to use my phone because my Wi-Fi is dropping me in and out today, because that's the beauty of technology. And so basically, we wanted to share that we are providing some summer supports and resources to families as kids in school year and into the school year. And we are fully aware, as Kevin mentioned already, about how hard districts have been working and families have been working and kids, and we know there's a lot of fatigue. What we don't want to see happen is kids go on summer break without any supports or encouragement to at least stay engaged in reading or doing some math games or just having access. We also know that local libraries in your communities are huge hubs of resources for families. Sometimes families go in just to get books or for air conditioning, connectivity, and quite honestly, some of those libraries may not open this summer or will have a late open. So we have our library media specialist who works with the local libraries and archives to post resources online for how folks can get information or what their local libraries may be offering. And then we also will have some resources tied in with mental health of students and families, and just resources districts can use or families can access, all very family friendly, not heavy in academia, but just to provide support. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you to add anything I've forgotten, and then we would welcome your feedback on what are other things we have not considered adding or what we need to increase the amount on for summer support. Kelly?
Thanks, Amanda. Welcome to everyone. I'll turn my camera on because I do have Wi-Fi right now, but earlier this morning, I was on a meeting and lost everything. So I feel your pain, Amanda. Now, I just want to reiterate everything that Amanda said and what we really want to hear from you all today as local school board members. You all have had to make a lot of tough decisions and will continue to have to make tough decisions over the next several months. So we'd really like to hear from you what challenges you see that your local district is facing. If we are able to come together in 6 weeks or 2 months for some type of summer learning activity in your district, what concerns or barriers do you feel like your local district is facing? And Amanda, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, so thanks, Kelly, for sharing that. And we really do want to hear from you what you're seeing in your community, in your district, from your perspective as a board member, and things we may not have considered or had the perspective of. So I'll give you an opportunity to share. You can either unmute and share your thoughts, or if you feel more comfortable, you'll see on the menu down below, you'll see a little chat box or an icon to talk, and you can type it in if you feel more comfortable with that, whatever works best. But I'll be quiet now and give you a chance to give us the input. Thanks.
Kelly, this is Diane. My concern is our students. I'm concerned that they'll be behind. I'm fearful for those seniors that's going to go to college. I'm fearful of those 8th graders that's going to step right into the role in high school. We really, each grade, that's my concern. I'm really concerned about it because NTI doesn't take the place, as we well know. NTI doesn't take the place of being in school, in regular school. I mean, I know Nelson County's doing some wonderful things, but that's my concern. I just don't, I'm not real comfortable thinking that we're going to be up there where we need to be. So that's my concern.
Thank you for sharing that. I will say that one of the things that we're currently working on at the department is a reentry plan. So whenever we do go back to face-to-face school, however that is going to look, we need to make sure that we provide districts with some local guidance to address issues just like the one that you mentioned. We are going to have to assess our students when they come back and figure out exactly where their learning needs are, because I do feel like there's going to be a need for intervention and remediation unlike we've ever seen before after a summer break. So we are very well aware of that and are currently working on some guidance to help teachers and principals and district leaders be able to make those tough decisions when they get back to make sure that we can help the students who are behind. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and to add to that, Diane, I appreciate that as well, and it's absolutely top of our mind. One of the things that we are also doing, excuse me, in addition to the reentry plan that Kelly talked about, is that currently we are running a webcast. Actually, last week started the series. There's another one today and another one the following week on walking teachers through their curriculum, identifying what was taught during NTI, or because we know some kids just simply didn't get exposure at all. And having a packet or a computer program is not the same as a human to intervene with those students if they have misconceptions. So we are providing guidance and support for teachers right now to start looking at what was taught, what would come next in the next grade level, and how to prepare for that. Because you're absolutely right. Our most at-risk kids especially don't need just to all be shoved into a high level intervention when every kid walking in has a deficit. They're going to have some type of a gap, whether it was just lack of understanding, misconception, not having access, whatever it may be. And so we are working, as Kelly said, really hard on providing the resources around that and considerations. Is to your point about kids going into college, another big concern of ours as well. We have been in contact with the Council on Post-Secondary Education, who oversees the public universities and even our private universities. They serve on our task force, and we've been in contact with them to see what the universities are doing to prepare for those kids with the gaps. So many of our universities have a plan for onboarding these students, especially knowing that there are going to be gaps in their learning. Some are going to have anxieties around this, and so just how they're preparing. So the universities are also preparing for this and are aware that kids are just going to need additional help and remediation, because you're right, there are serious gaps, and then we have a whole summer to go before we even get started. So I appreciate your comment on that. And you are 100% right. That is our top priority. And it is the number one concern we're hearing from districts across the state.
Great. Thank you.
This is Larry Dotson from Oldham County. One of the things I'm concerned about is we can plan all we want, but I'm concerned the governor isn't giving us advance notice on what phase that we can open up certain things during the summer in school to work with these kids, like a reading academy or what have you. And he needs to give the districts a little more advance notice than what he's doing to businesses right now.
I appreciate your comment on that, and it is hard to navigate. You're right. It is very difficult. I know a lot of districts, to your point, have asked about how they can reach out to students who struggled or who have not had the opportunity to receive any instruction, and what that may look like depending on what phase we would be in. Are we able to serve one kid 6 feet apart? Are we allowed to have a few in the same room? and to your point, that's been a lot of the concern as well. But I appreciate you bringing that up, and that's something I've noted as well. And hopefully we can work together to get a little bit more notice if possible. I know it's uncharted for everyone, but I appreciate your comment very much. Thank you.
Anybody else?
That's Carl Wickland. I have a question that I guess falls into this, and I'm not sure if this is the right place for it, but is there any discussion around any type of pre-testing for employees and or students that would allow us to bring the students back at a quicker point than they might do based on the statistics that are out there for the general population?
I'm not sure if Amanda and Kelly, if we have anybody on the call that we can get that question answered for you, Carl, that could answer that question. That's a public health / testing question. So I don't know if Kevin has jumped back on. I know he was.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I have not heard that mentioned. My guess is we do not have the sufficient number of tests available yet for that to happen statewide. But that is certainly something we're in constant contact with public health, asking them questions, and we'll certainly take that down as something that we can get additional feedback or maybe a timeline on if that is in the possible, is a scenario that's possible.
Well, and the reason I ask is we have these children we know are going to be really tough cases to bring back up because they were struggling going into this. And if there was a way in my district that I could test some of those high at-risk kids and bring them back into the program a week or two early to help them get up to speed, it would relieve a huge burden on my staff because they would have less kids really behind, probably all the kids somewhat behind, but those ones that are really behind are the ones that are going to take a lot of leadership and teachers and administrators' time to bring to a point where they can be interjected with their peers. So being able to test some of those kids that need that and bring them in early might be a big help to my teachers and staff.
I want to make sure I understand the question though. Are you, when you're talking of testing, you're talking about a COVID test to ensure that they're okay from that perspective so they can come into a setting and have remediation, or are you actually talking about an academic test to see where they are on grade level, or both?
Well, first of all, I would say the COVID test, but
okay,
once they come in, you're going to have to test anyway.
Right. Okay. All right.
Level.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah, but, and for some reason, I'm a little more into, I think we should be doing more testing than we're doing on the level of whether people have already had the disease or not. But apparently the government thinks different along that line. So we're only testing people to see if they've got it. That's kind of a short window to look at, only 2 weeks. So I'm not sure even if when you test those kids, would you have to do another test if they needed 3 or 4 weeks of mediation? So it's just something that I've been thinking about. I wondered if anybody else had put any thought behind it.
Thank you, Carl. Anybody else has a question for this particular topic? And if not, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, well, we have kind of already started this conversation, and Kelly had already mentioned that we have a team together that is working on reentry. Kelly's leading those efforts, but we all definitely have input on that. And as mentioned, there are logistics on the how-to, which many of you all have already mentioned. How do you organize that? How do you plan for that? And just the logistics around it. There's the academic side that we've already talked about of just preparing for the gaps and preparing for the needs of the students. And then the mental health piece of just being aware of the concerns, anxieties, or any kind of trauma that our students have encountered Many of our families are unemployed, and those who are preparing to go back to work, their children may be the caregivers for their younger siblings. Just a lot of scenarios we don't even know what some have encountered, and preparing for that as well as for the staff to return. So that's kind of what we are preparing for. Kelly, I'll turn it over to you since you're leading that effort to give more detail, and then we'd love your feedback of anything you haven't already shared.
Thank you. So I have been working with different offices across the agency today as we try to put our preliminary plan together that we will be sharing with districts about what they need to think about when it is time to go back to school. The food service needs, transportation, health and safety, instructional issues, technology. And so we are trying to develop a document that we'll be able to share out with school districts that I'm sure they will share with you as local school board members that will help guide you all as you all make decisions about re-entering face-to-face school when we have the opportunity to do so. So I think you've already touched on some of your concerns, but if you have additional ones or other things that you'd like to share as local school board members that will help us develop that guidance, we would love to hear from you.
Before we receive some comments and feedback, I do want to add, Kelly, and I want to make sure that the local board members know, and we discussed this yesterday on the superintendent webcast. You may have already heard from your superintendent about this. Had a conversation yesterday with the governor and lieutenant governor, and they anticipate that districts are going to have to be very nimble in the fall and be prepared for various scenarios. And so that's the plan that Dr. Foster is talking about, making sure districts and local boards know that they may have various calendar scenarios that they will need to perhaps move to or choose from, depending on what happens with the virus. If we see a plateau as we think we are, and if there's a decrease, there could be a peak in the fall. There may not be a peak in the fall. Some districts may, as a result, may want to choose to go to school and start the school year really, really early, like at the end of July, to get days and hours in in-person classes, knowing that there's a possibility for a spike in the fall that could switch you over to NTI or even a break, and then you come back. There needs to be a scenario for if we are not in a plateau and we can't come back on in-person classes in August, that you do a late start. And then, of course, a traditional may want to have how you would normally be ready to open school as you might normally would do in a normal year. And then layered in that, we're going to have discussions about if there are social distancing requirements in place. Even when we're back in school, there may be some restrictions on how many kids can be in a room, for example. I'm just making this up. I don't know this to be true yet, or maybe a guidance that from public health that we should not have a 60 passenger bus should not have 60 kids in it because of the risk. So we're continuing those conversations with public health to help inform that guidance, and we plan on giving a district kind of a menu of things to think about, and need to be ready to be flexible and nimble as we get close to the beginning of the next school year. And then when we're in the next semester, there need to be prepared for potential changes in midstream.
Okay, other questions for Kelly and Amanda? And Sherry, I'm working on trying to get you unmuted, and it's
Commissioner,
right.
this is Ambrose Wilson. I'm on.
Thank you, Ambrose. Good to hear your voice.
Good to hear yours, sir.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next next topic, which is public health issues. And I think Kay Kennedy may be on the call for that purpose. Kay, are you there?
Hey, David, as soon as I can remember to unmute, that's the big challenge for today is
Yeah.
taking oneself off of mute. So from a public health perspective, there are, as I think has been previously alluded to, just a number of concerns about the safety of not only the students, but staff members as well. And we can start the conversation with there are laws and regulations on the book right now concerning the fact that students need to have or need to be on their vaccination schedule and their dental checkups to get into school. And if those offices are temporarily shuttered or kids just can't get in to get those done, how do we handle that? From everything to planning graduation in the end of this school year to getting school started next year and then ongoing operation, local health officials have to be involved in the decisions, because what's going on in Jefferson County versus what's going on in Owsley County versus what's going on in Paducah may be entirely different scenarios, and a one-size-fits-all approach is just simply not going to be feasible. So we have established and will continue to work, we have established a relationship and will continue to work closely with the Department for Public Health in terms of keeping both students and staff safe. And as we consider the factors that go into reopening especially, we've got to be able to identify what are the risks involved if we can't, for example, find the necessary PPE for the school nurse or for the cafeteria workers. How do we handle a situation when the supply is limited or not even available at all? So we do have these continual challenges that are placed, in the path of getting things reopened that we've got to think through, and to have a great relationship with the Department for Public Health is certainly one to consider. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Anyone have a question for Kay?
Or feedback or concerns. Obviously, we welcome anything. Pushback, things we haven't thought of.
I think the thing about it, this Diane, you don't know what to expect. We're sort of sitting in limbo that because it's never happened before. So it's hard to ask a question when we don't know what exactly we're looking at.
So thank you for that comment, but just, anything that pops in your mind, like how are you going to handle this, or have you thought about that? Just the questions themselves are important to get captured, because we in some areas we just don't have a lot of answers today, but there are a lot of national organizations who are addressing, for example, one of our branch managers is part of the National Directors of Pupil Transportation, and they've already got a list of concerns as long as your arm about how we do safe transportation on the school buses. So you may not think of a question today, but certainly you know how to get in touch with David and can pass those forward if anything comes up in the future.
Okay, this is Carl. I do have a quick question.
Go ahead, Carl.
I guess the question I have is, have you put any thought into a process of how and to handle and what to do if a student gets sick at school, or if a student arrives at school sick as far as quarantining that student?
Yes, that's a big concern, and the concern is around, do we go into some sort of temperature taking protocol for the students and staff that you have to, walk through the scanner as you come in the building every morning? or, exactly what happens if a case shows up positive in the school? How do we do the contact tracing? Again, people are thinking of these things, and how quickly we get to solution is going to be really important.
Thank you.
Kay, this is Ambrose. You stated there's a lot of questions that haven't been answered. There's a lot of things that we need to finalize. How far into the summer, is there a drop dead date that you have to have all these things answered before you make any decisions?
Kevin, you may want to jump in here as well, but currently we are trying to gather information in all of our operational and academic areas to be able to put together a proposal to give to the governor's office in terms of a reopening plan, much like he's asking for now from the healthcare industry, the dental industry. We will likely produce that document representative of school districts. So I anticipate that sooner rather than later. Kevin, you may want to weigh in on some other timing.
No, I agree with that. And it was mentioned earlier, the problem is, there are things we don't know and can't know right now about how the virus will progress or regress. And all of that will influence what has to happen in schools. And so that's why we're asking districts and superintendents to think of all the options that you need to be prepared to do and to be able to act, and know that your calendar that you set with your board may not end up looking like it does on paper at the end of the semester, just like it doesn't right now. And boards are going to have to be prepared to make some decisions midstream as we go through the semester. They are likely to have to make those decisions on their calendars as we respond to any spikes in the virus.
Okay, thank you.
This is Sherry Robinson. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sherry, we can. Good. I'm glad we got you.
I had to call back in. But my concern is with the young kindergarten students who have never been in school before, at entering school at this time, because there's so much closeness that has to be done with kindergarten students, to take in consideration what steps need to be done with them to make sure that they don't start behind.
Amanda or Kelly or someone want to possibly take that one, or Kevin can.
Well, it's an excellent comment. I'll defer to Amanda if she has any feedback on it, but it's certainly something that we've got to be aware of, and districts are going to have to be aware of. It's going to, we've talked about this earlier, all students in all grade levels are going to come in to next semester in a much different frame of mind, and there are going to be social and emotional issues as a result of the things that are going on, and the lack of the end of year activities, and a lack of just a normal socialization patterns have all been interrupted. And we're hearing anecdotally that's already affecting students. And I heard from a co-op director last week about how she was hearing from some superintendents and principals how once outgoing students, they've noticed some of them are very reserved now, and they're staying in their rooms, or they're hiding behind their mom's legs if they're younger children. And so we're in the Dr. Sweeney will talk to us about some of these issues. And then, that's not even talking about the academic issues. So it's very much going to be a different year, and we're going to have to be prepared for that. And as Dr. Ellis said earlier, everyone is going to have some slide, if you will, in their academic progress because of this. Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
I think we might have lost Amanda, but this is Kelly. I will just say that that's something that we're working on with our guidance, and that I think local districts are already talking about. We're going to have two pieces that we're going to have to address when we open back up. That academic piece, the students that are behind from the typical summer slide, plus being out of face-to-face instruction since March, and then a social and emotional piece. There's a lot of work that comes out of my office around social and emotional health, and we partner with Amanda's office with Dr. Damian Sweeney and his work around social emotional, as well as providing guidance to local guidance counselors to help them prepare to meet the needs of students. So a lot of that support has been happening currently to local districts and their guidance counselors so they can stay in touch with their students. And we will continue to provide those supports around academic needs and social and emotional moving forward through any summer programs as well as the reentry, because I think you are right. Those are two areas that are both extremely important and that our students will be challenged with issues in both areas.
This is David Webster. You were talking about the vaccinations for students before they come in and maybe an issue with that. I have a question. Let's say they come up with a vaccine for this COVID-19. Do you think the vaccination for that would be put into the mix of what would be required for the students and maybe for the staff also?
This is Kay. Given the time frame that we are working in, I think that's probably not something that will be available for our consideration probably for a little while. But that's currently in statute and regulation. I think we'd have to go through that process. Kevin, you want to weigh in on that?
That's correct, unless if for some, I think they're in clinical trials right now, as if I understand it correctly on that, or at least one vaccine, and would have to be cleared before that would be a requirement. If for some reason the General Assembly had not yet acted and there was a vaccine ready that was approved by the FDA, et cetera, and public health did think we needed to wait, then that some of that could be done through an executive order is my guess. But the normal procedure, Kay is correct, that would come through statutory requirement and or a regulation change by the State Board of Education to add that specific immunization.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Kay before we move on? Or concerns? Okay. Greta et al. I know Greta has a team of folks with her today, or Sylvia, or whoever.
Sure, yeah. This is Sylvia, and I'm actually here for Greta. She had another commitment, and so she sent me to kind of make sure that you guys got all the information you needed about special education. Some of it we'll talk about a little bit later with CARES funding, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of prime you for a little bit of your conversation later for the special education perspective. Two of the biggest things in special education that we've been looking for while we're looking into the past is, are students provided with equity and were they provided with access, right? So those are the two biggest standards that we're looking for. Was there equity for students with disabilities? Did they have access to the curriculum? Were they able to reach it? Did they have internet access? Were there problems? Were their parents participating? A lot of things like that. Sort of our motto is really thinking about how we can look into the past to prepare for the future. Right now, there's a whole lot of discussion, but between extended school year services, which we call ESY, or in compensatory education. And there's a whole lot of confusion between the two. They're very similar, but they're not the same. There's currently guidance coming out of our department. We're really developing it right now to help delineate the difference between the two and help guide districts on how to document when those services are needed. The standard for compensatory education is missed services. So anything, it's really more related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Anytime a student was not provided a service, particularly if they weren't able to access it, that would be when comp ed would come into play. And so the standard for ESY is really regression of taught skills movement. So ESY doesn't necessarily apply in a pandemic, but it could. And so what we're working on is just really expanding guidance on the two of those and getting that out to districts prior to school starting back up so that we know that they're able to see kind of the difference and how do they document all of those things. One of the things that comes into play, and I'm sorry, my battery just said it was low, so I'm going to plug it in while we're talking. One of the things we've been talking about is maintenance of effort. And so if you're not familiar with maintenance of effort, the most simple way to explain it is basically ensuring that you spend the same amount of money this year on your special education population out of your local funds that you did in previous years. It gets a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the easiest way to explain it. And so that comes into play when we talk about things later, like CARES and GEAR fundings. The CARES and GEARS funding really have kind of a catch-22 on both ends. We're encouraging districts to consider reserving a portion of those fundings for compensatory education because we know there's going to be a lot of students who need a lot of additional services once this is over. But it gets a little complicated as when do you spend your local funds and when should you use CARES and GEARS funding. The great part about the CARES and GEARS fundings is that they don't increase your high water mark for maintenance of effort. So if I spend more money this year than I did last year using the CARES and GEARS funding, it doesn't actually require me to spend that same amount next year. But there's also on the back end a little bit of concern on if you don't spend enough local funds to meet your maintenance of effort, that it could potentially come with additional complications. And so we've really just been, there's kind of maintenance of effort issues no matter which way you swing it. So we've been really encouraging people and districts to contact staff in the Office of Special Education and Early Learning to help guide you in navigating maintenance of effort requirements. We definitely have a fabulous finance team who is really, really well versed on how to when to spend, when to not spend, how to help you navigate that without increasing your maintenance of effort. So we would always, encourage you to call them and they can come and help you with that. Another thing that we've really learned is that we really need to focus on contingency planning for students with disabilities for the future. So using what we've learned in the past, how can we then guide admissions and release committees or ARCs to really think about what happens if this happens again, or what happens if we go back for a little while and then there's another surge. How can we write those things into a student's IEP so that there's no break in service? What did we learn from the last time that they had this big, long break in services? And how can we really prevent that from happening again? What kind of access do we need to ensure that they have? How can we document that in an IEP? What kind of conversations do we need to have with their parents to make sure everybody is on the same page? And so that's definitely something that we're working on, helping to guide districts on how to do those. And then we've also had weekly webinars between our special education cooperatives and the early childhood regional training centers. They've been really successful. I think this week is the 6th week. It's the end of the scheduled ones, but I think they've been so successful. A lot of people have asked us to continue those. And so that's been in the mix. I'm going to throw it really quick to Bill Buchanan, and Bill is going to be able to talk to you a little bit about what's going on in preschool. And then once we finish up, we'll take a moment to kind of get any kind of feedback you guys have for students with disabilities or preschool populations and things you want to make sure that we're thinking of in those. So Bill.
Thanks, Sylvia. And yes, I want to add to the conversation our efforts in supporting the state-funded preschool program. We want to make sure that early childhood appreciated the question and conversation earlier about kindergarten. And just to say that we're having similar conversations and questions and generating ideas around support for preschool as well as kindergarten, and to say that we definitely know that early childhood is the foundation for school success, and so we need to include these ideas in our plans for reentry for the new school year. Due to the economic impact of COVID-19, school districts should anticipate that we're going to see a potential increase in the number of eligible students for the state-funded preschool program. State-funded preschool program is for 3- and 4-year-olds with disabilities, as well as income-eligible children, 4-year-olds. And so we may well see an increase, and this will have implications for how students are recruited, screening and enrollment, assessment, and we'll need to develop guidance and have plans for how to ensure students receive developmentally appropriate teaching and learning experiences while maintaining appropriate social distancing. And so this will have implications for the classrooms, for transportation, for playgrounds. Teachers will need to think about room arrangements, distances between the learning centers, and so we're going to be providing guidance and support around this. In terms of providing enrollment opportunities for all eligible students, we're going to have to strengthen our partnerships with Head Start and with childcare. We're going to have to think innovatively about these partnerships to ensure that all eligible state-funded preschool students have access to high-quality services. Sylvia mentioned earlier the CARES Act, and we believe that CARES Act funding, whether it's the GEARS or the ESSERS funds, may be used to support preschool services, including distance learning. Sylvia also mentioned the support that we're providing through our office right now for special education, for special ed directors, as well as preschool coordinators. And each week we've been offering webinars through our regional training centers to preschool coordinators and teachers. And this week's session will focus on getting outside, get outside and learn outside, using the outdoors for integrated non-traditional instruction for preschool families. Other sessions have focused on social emotional learning and the importance of routines. We've had sessions also to focus on literacy and this is in purposeful play. And this is a kind of a snapshot of what's going on right now. But most importantly, we're eager to hear more about concerns as well as ideas for successfully starting the new school year.
So I think with that, we'll open it up to any kind of questions or feedback you'd like to give us around special education or preschool.
Sylvia, this is Ambrose again. Are you going to be sending out any information about lesson learned from the last 2 or 3 months regarding special education, education for our students in preschool, etc.?
So I think that's what we've been doing with those weekly webinars, is really trying to get that information out in real time and saying, okay, here's what we've learned. Let's get that out to you as quickly as possible. Here's what we're learning we need to do better and how we can fix those things. And this is the information that is really hot topics right now, so that we're able to really address those head on when we're hearing them over and over from districts, and get the information out quicker to districts and directors of special education. Some of the things we've talked about include things like, how do you progress monitor in a pandemic? That was a big one. And so we've gone through, what does specially designed instruction look like? So a lot of that has been handled through those webinars, but then we've also developed a frequently asked questions, and that's on the KDE website, that it has also kind of really helped to answer some of those questions that we've learned through the lessons about, okay, here's some of the things that we didn't know the answers to at the beginning of all of this, but now we do know the answers to. And so that's available on the website as well.
Good. Very good.
Other questions for Sylvia and or Bill?
Okay. David, before you continue, yes. I do want to kind of do a summary comment. I think we alluded to it in some of the other presentations regarding the returning to school, but I want to highlight that we are involved in several national and regional efforts to make sure we're learning from best practices going on in other states, and of course offering our what we're doing to other states as well. And I'll just give you a few examples. We're participating in the Council of Chief State School Officers. That's the national organization of all the commissioners of education, participating several times a week. I've got a call with them, with those chiefs and their staff there in DC this afternoon, and they are assisting us in working through a lot of these issues to learn from other states. We have similar relationship with the Southern Regional Education Board based out of Atlanta. That's a long time historic organization that assists states in the South with education issues. And of course, as you all may know, Dr. Pruitt is now their executive director and president. And so they are providing a playbook, I believe they're calling it, for schools, districts, and states to use on reopening schools. We're active in weekly calls with them, developing that playbook. And then finally, there are various conversations we're having just with other states. And as an example, I had a call yesterday with the Minnesota Commissioner of Education, and she reached out to me and we were sharing ideas back and forth. And the reason for that is Minnesota is in this group of states that Governor Beshear is working with, that they're kind of on a similar timeline as Kentucky's and have been handling the pandemic in similar ways. And so we have a lot in common as to how schools might reopen. So just want to make sure you all are aware that we're also not trying to do this in isolation and trying to learn from other states, and also sharing things that we may be doing here that may be of interest to them. It's been very helpful. The problem we have, though, is that we run out of hours in the day to have a lot of these conversations and calls, and there's so much good information out there. Sometimes it's hard to process it all, but I guess that's a nice problem to have.
Thank you, Kevin. Robin, are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you, David. And my name is Robin Kinney. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations. I think I have appeared in front of your membership before, but it's been a little while. I think Charlie Harmon actually presented on behalf of our office the last time with you. We're going to talk today a little bit about money. Money is always important, especially when you're already in tight fiscal times, and then you have something like the coronavirus pandemic come and overlay on top of everything else that you're trying to accomplish. So we're going to talk about the CARES Act. A couple of people have already mentioned it. It is a piece of federal legislation that became effective on March 27th. It is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. And it is a very, very large piece of federal funding. It's about $2.2 trillion across lots of different facets of funding to really assist in all types of different situations across the United States. Of that $2.2 trillion in emergency funding, $30.75 billion has been dedicated to emergency education funding to the states. And within that, Kentucky overall, again, back to that overall funding that's coming to the Commonwealth, not just education, but Kentucky overall is going to receive about $1.73 billion in CARES Act funds. Today, we're really going to focus on two areas, two pots of money, I should say, that are coming to the Commonwealth. The first is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, and that's about $44 million. And the secondary pot is a little bit larger pot. That's the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and that's about $193 million. Of course, in education, we have to have our acronyms, so we shorthand both of those and we refer to them as GEAR and ESSER. So next slide, please, David. And let's start with the Governor's Emergency Education Relief. Each of these pots of money is just a little bit different. I will say overall, sometimes when you talk about funds that are coming from the federal government, there are very restrictive requirements on these. And while these do have requirements, They are much broader and more flexible than what we typically see when federal funds are distributed to states and then down to local school districts. So I will compliment the U.S. Department of Ed in both trying to get these to us quickly and making the process very, very easy. And I'll kind of comment on both of these as we roll along. Kentucky's allocation, again, from GEAR is almost $44 million. We received a notice of funding and application, which was our ability to say, yes, we would like access to these funds on April 14th. And I'm very pleased to announce that yesterday, I think it was yesterday, all my days are kind of running together, but I think it was yesterday, earlier this week, let's just say that. The application was approved by the U.S. Department of Education. So we are now in line for receipt of these funds. As local school board members, some of the things that you're probably interested in is how easy is it to access these funds? We want to make it as easy as possible to distribute funds to districts. And so we have come up with a very simplified process. We will require your district superintendent to sign certain assurances with notification to their local school board. We're not going to require you all to convene to take formal action just to receive the funds. Of course, as you roll along, just like with all funds that come into your district, it's important that your superintendent and you work together and that you have good notice of what the funds are available for and expenditures associated with them. Out of the GEARS money, David, one last thing on that prior slide, the governor actually had choices, thank you, had choices on how to award funds. The first way that it could be done was emergency support to school districts that the State Education Agency, or KDE, deemed most significantly impacted by the coronavirus. And then the other two, one was for institutes of higher education, and finally to other educational partners. Next slide, please. We were very, very fortunate that early on, the Lieutenant Governor and the cabinet, the Education and Workforce Development Cabinet, reached out to KDE and shared with us that out of the $44 million, the governor had determined that he would allocate $30 million of that pot to support elementary and secondary education efforts. In the earlier slide, we talked about this requirement of determining districts that have been significantly impacted by the coronavirus. In Kentucky, we've taken the position that all of our school districts have been significantly impacted. You might see some other states that have certain heightened hot pockets, maybe in more urban settings where they've been really significantly impacted. But if we think about how Kentucky has been impacted, we've had impact across the state, and everyone's dealing with similar types of challenges. And we all kind of ceased those in-person classes at the same time. So really, we're all kind of in this together. So we've taken the position that we would like to distribute GEAR funding to all districts. As part of us submitting our application, in consultation with the governor and Lieutenant Governor and the governor's office, we determined that two areas that we kept hearing that districts really needed some help with were remote learning and technology. Again, as we've had NTI in place, again, compliments to David Cook and his team on the good job that they've done. We are getting better at NTI every single day, but we have some opportunities that we can improve our remote learning for students and operations really for staff. So that is going to be one area of focus for the GEAR money. The second is school district food services. School districts have really stepped up to the plate in helping us to provide food services to our students. We've seen lots of really creative and innovative models, and we would like that to continue to the extent that it can be continued. When schools finish for the school year, the needs of students and access to good quality nutritional meals continues throughout the summer. So out of the GEARS fund, districts will be permitted to use their funds to support remote learning technology and for continuation of school district food services. Next slide, please. The other pot of money is the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And this is the larger pot, about 193 million. A minimum amount of 90% of that will be distributed to local school districts. We received our notice of fund and application, our invitation to apply for that on April 23rd. And again, this week we have received approval of our application. And so again, US Ed made it very, very simple for us to apply. And this pot of money is actually even broader than the GEARS money. So the broad permissible uses under the Act include any activities that are currently authorized under ESSA, IDEA, Perkins, McKinney-Vento, and the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act. So very, very broad permissible uses. There's also on that slide, lots of other things that are more directly related to the coronavirus and activities that districts are going to have to undertake in order to either stay in compliance with cleaning, disinfecting, coordinating emergency responses. I know we're going to hear a little later in your presentation from Damian Sweeney. Mental health supports are listed. Summer learning that we've already talked about, that concern about remediation and what we sometimes call the summer slide, very permissible expenses for all that as well. Next slide, please. I will share with you also, that's the end of the presentation, and we've covered it at a very high level, but I do want to share with you that we've been talking with your superintendents across many superintendents webcasts that we've had in place, and every presentation I think has included information on the CARES Act, either through the questions that we are receiving from our local school districts or prepared presentation that we already have in place. We still look forward to receiving additional guidance from US Ed because that is still ongoing. And we, like the special education presentation before and what Sylvia had referred to, we are continually trying to provide those updates. The other thing from an operational perspective in my office, we are in very close contact because we help support all the operations of local school districts. So we are in regular communication through calls and webcasts with your finance officers, your DPPs, your school nurses and health coordinators, your food service staff, your pupil transportation people, and your facilities folks, all those operationals people, because anything that is done that we make a change in how we usually do things, that usually impacts the operations side of the school district's house. So I'm going to stop there and let you all ask some questions. And it's been a pleasure to be able to present some of this to you today.
What questions do you all have for Robin? Gosh, Robin, they usually have lots of questions about money.
I know.
So.
Well, the money will be coming. We'll be talking again with your superintendents next week about it. Again, we're trying to make it very easy. Guidance will be forthcoming. In working with Dr. Kelly Foster, we are putting together guidance for each pot of the money. So that will come along with just how you access your funds, how you will do your request for drawdowns and cash. And we'll continue to provide updates to them and then encourage you to ask questions of your local school districts and superintendents on the uses of the funds.
I've got one question. Charlie Wise, are y'all hearing me?
Yes. Hi, Charlie.
Okay. Hi. Where is the other 33 million? Why is it not getting allocated? It came in as emergency funds, federal dollars, why are we not sending it out also?
So if you're referring to the GEARS funding, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there was 14 million there and 19 in the other emergency relief fund.
So in the GEARS funding, that money will be distributed to local school districts. It will the uses are going to be for remote learning and for food service. Whereas the larger pot of money also distributed to local school districts up to 90, we have to distribute 90% of that to local school districts. And that is much broader. So you can use it for all kinds of other things, not just restricted to those two categories.
Yeah, I understand that, but it seems like the state is holding about $30 million of these two funds, 33 million. Why are they holding that money?
Well, let me back up for just a minute. Elementary and secondary will receive 30 million out of the 44. The other portion of the governor's emergency is going to go to institutes of higher education. So it'll go to colleges and universities.
Golly, they've got the lottery money. What else do they need?
Well, we're all competing for every penny. You're absolutely right. I think we were very appreciative that we got the 30 million because, I guess the decision could have been made that all of it would have gone to the institutes of higher education. So we're very happy that we got 30 million of it.
Okay, I guess that's a get after our legislator problem then.
And then out of the other pot of money from the 194 million, 10% of that can be withheld at the state level, but it is to support our local school districts. So the department is currently putting together proposals that will help local school districts. For example, one thing that those funds may be used for are to support professional development. So as we talk about NTI and the continuing needs of local school districts to support either your staff that are trying to learn more about how better to deliver instruction or to support students, we might do some kind of statewide initiative hoping to realize some economies of statewide purchasing that would benefit all. So that would just be one example of how those funds could be used to really help support local school districts, but still at the state level.
This is Diane. Is there a way that you can send us a list of what these monies can be used for?
Sure. We have a lot of information, again, out on our COVID-19 website. We are constantly, and we have provided PowerPoints to the superintendents, and we're happy to make all those available to you.
Yes, I for one would like to do it.
Okay.
I'd like
Hey,
to.
Robin, this is Ambrose, and I want to follow up on what Diane was saying. As I'm sitting here listening to this, all this is going to happen very quickly and very rapidly. And superintendents, I think it would be helpful if a board chair or a board member could be involved in the calls and the webinars so that, we can become better versed in what all of the money can be used for and timetables, et cetera. I think it's very, very important for board members to have somewhat of maybe a working knowledge of everything so that when we make our decisions, we will have all that information also.
Yes, I agree.
I appreciate that comment. And we'll make sure that you get access to all the eligible uses. It very much is a district decision. I think the beauty of the CARES Act is that not every district is going to have the same needs. And it's important that you be thoughtful about how you expend these dollars. Federal funding, usually just comes once. And so I know that they have already started talking about another funding package relief at the federal government. It's too early. It's another one of those uncertainties that we've been talking about throughout this conversation today. So I would encourage districts, and as we've presented to superintendents, it's important that you think about your short-term needs, but you need to kind of think about your long-term needs as well, because this money will only go as far as it goes. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness on that.
Robin, I really do appreciate you using the word thoughtfulness, because board members, Diane, David, Charlie, all of us are going to have to be thoughtful into how to use these funds to best meet the needs of our individual districts. And the only way you can be as thoughtful as necessary is to have all the pertinent information and to be able to know the opportunities and to know what you can do. It's very, very important.
Yes, yes.
We'll make sure through David that any of the materials that we've been providing on the CARES Act that talk about the permissible uses of funds, also your timeline to get it out the door and use them. I will say, and I should have included this in my earlier remarks, you know, districts are aware from an allocation standpoint about how much they're going to be receiving for the ESSER funds. They are distributed through the Title I allocation. You do not have to use them in the same manner as Title I, but we tried to give them kind of a heads up on what that would look like. So districts will receive out of the ESSER pot about 83% of their prior Title I allocation. So superintendents and finance officers are already aware of about the amount they would receive from the big pot. They are permitted to expend those dollars back to expenditures already incurred as of March 13th. So March 13th was the date of the declaration at the national level of the emergency. And so they can do that. A lot of, and in both pots of money, you know, I think we see from conversations with districts a keen interest in the technology component, because as we move on, we may have the need to operate more remotely on an ongoing basis. So we do see that as an area of interest for some districts. In other districts, they're better equipped, and this may not be a need for them. So I think it is important that every district consider the allocation that they receive in the terms of the need in their own local community.
You know, one of the examples you mentioned, Robin, remote learning.
Yes.
You know, and I'm thinking of, you know, one group of individuals we sometimes forget about when it comes to the stress and pressure of NTI, our parents. You know, I've had many parents and grandparents who are raising their children who really didn't have a clue about what to do or how to do it. And, you know, I'm thinking that there could be a possibility of trying to have some classes or seminars or meetings with them to help them understand what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, that family engagement component in the world of remote learning, it's going to be the way we're going to operate. So, and we have some students and some staff that are just absolute rock stars. You know, they understand which button to push and how to mute and unmute and everything else. And then there's other people, myself included, that this is a whole new world to be operating this on a long-term basis. So I think there'll be lots of opportunities.
Well, thank you so much for trying to get as much information to school board members, because that's another example. If we didn't know that funds could be used on remote learning and it wasn't presented to us by our superintendent, then we couldn't be thoughtful in that area because we wouldn't know about it. So thank you in advance for trying to get us the information.
More than welcome.
Yes, thank you. I agree. We don't know it all. You know, that's why you pick a superintendent, but I want to know it all. Yep.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Robin before we move on? Thank you, Robin, for your time today, and we will move on into our last actual topic before we open it up for some general feedback and comment and conversation with you all, to Dr. Damian Sweeney. And I'll let Damian introduce his co-presenter, and you guys can take it away.
Okay, good afternoon. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. So we're going to jump right in. My name is Damien. I'm the program coordinator for comprehensive school counseling, and my co-presenter is Miriam Selman, who's amazing, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thank you. I'm Miriam Silman. I'm the Trauma-Informed Care Program Administrator at the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities, but also serve as the co-lead on Project Aware, and in that capacity work very closely with the Division for Student Success at KDE. So I'm kind of half and half at KDE and the Department for Behavioral Health, and it gives me a great opportunity to continue to promote the idea of integrating behavioral health into education. And I think that what's going on now and our plans for reentry are a perfect example of the importance of doing that and how mental health and well-being influence the ability to learn. So.
Right. We were also joined, I appreciated Dr. Foster mentioning that we're working on a reentry in terms of social and emotional health, staff and student wellness as well. We're working on a guidance document. We're finalizing that document. So we're really excited about introducing that to our districts. And this slide deck today has kind of been formed as a result of that guidance document. So we're working with Judy Vanderhaar, who is another one of our colleagues at the department, and she is also incredible. So there are a lot of, as you know, there are many sources of stress during this unusual time. There can be anxiety about exposure and illness. What you and I may have experienced with a simple cough a few months ago may really be concerning, and we might be concerned that we're now infected, and that simple cough, which could be the result of something like a cold or allergies, is much bigger than it is. So there's a lot of anxiety about that. Certainly there's stress about limited connections to others. We had the pleasure of talking with about 25 students yesterday, and this was their big ticket item. And we also asked our adults. I was also working with the Southeast South Central Educational Cooperative today, and even the adults at that cooperative said that this was their biggest stressor, that limited connection to others. This lack of cognitive stimulation and monotony is also a stressor for people. Limited access to normal coping strategies. So if your coping strategy is to go play cards with a friend or go to the gym, you can't do that right now, or go to the pool, you can't do that right now, and that's another stressor. Many of our family members are stressed. Is everybody going to be okay within the family? Also, there are financial stressors. Right now, we know that there are many people that have been laid off or furloughed. Any time that there's been losses and grief, either as a result of the pandemic or of something else, obviously is going to create stress. And then this is just an uncertain time, right? We don't know what to expect. We don't know what to expect for the summer. We don't know what to expect for the fall. We don't know when we're going to be able to rejoin our family and friends without social distancing. So that uncertainty also creates stress. Now, when we think about students, which I think you guys are going to be really interested in, our students are going to display stress in a different way, right? They may appear clingy or whiny or tearful, frightened or anxious. They may be agitated. You can imagine that they're going to be hyperactive or overreactive. Now that they're going to, once they do come back. They're going to be irritable, impatient, aggressive, and angry. We're already seeing signs of kids feeling withdrawn, disengaged, lethargic. It's funny with our student council, we have about 25 kids, and you'll see the kids get on video, and sometimes they'll be in their beds talking to us. So just that tiredness and that need to rest, depression, sadness, hopelessness, and even suicidality can be signs of stress for students. Poor concentration, limited comprehension, and poor memory right now. We can even see students that start to complain about physical symptoms that they may experience. Man, I've got a headache, or my stomach just keeps on hurting and it won't go away. Can also be another sign of stress. Sleep disturbance. We are constantly hearing about kids that just really struggle to sleep. They're worried that they're either going to get infected, or a family member is, or a friend. We're also seeing this with appetite disturbance as well. And then we might see kids that seek attention. I have 4-year-old twins and a 3-year-old, all boys, and the seeking attention is a big thing that they like to do right now. But we can expect this to happen more and more with our students, and students even getting in the face of the adults in their lives. So, board members, what are you guys seeing? Feel free to put it in the chat box or say it out loud, but what signs of stress are you seeing or are you concerned about with students from your districts? I'll give you a second. You can, again, use your audio if you'd like, or put that in the chat box. While you're doing that, I'll keep going, and I'll talk a little bit about signs of stress in staff. So we know that that our staff is stressed out. We know that they're overwhelmed. We know that although it kind of sounds nice to be able to say, you know, I can work in my pajamas if I want to, I can work from home. We know that working in this scenario, working virtually, having more virtual meetings, more screen time, trying to connect with all of your students is going to create just different levels of anxiety and stress as well. So our staff might be experiencing that anxiety. They might be fearful. They might be depressed or sad. One of the things that we look forward to every single year, I'm from Louisville, and I worked at Seneca High School. And one thing that we did is we would, every last day of school, when that final bell rang, we would, as a staff, we would gather in the main lobby and we would just cheer those kids out of the building and just high five them, hug them, tell them we're going to miss them. And that was a way for us to bond with our kiddos, but also a way for us to bond with each other. So not having that to look forward to is sad and can create some different stress for our folks. Our staff might be withdrawn right now, less engaged and feeling absent. They may be irritable, impatient, frustrated, angry, explosive, or overreactive. Again, agitated or with poor concentration. They may experience some of those vague physical complaints that we discussed earlier. And again, that feeling of overwhelmingness, confusion, difficulty with problem solving or making decisions, and then loss of creativity or lack of motivation right now. So there's also many risks for increased stress response. So that can include, like, if a person has recently lost somebody, or they've had this history of significant loss within their family or friendship group, then that can create an increased stress response from people. We know that past and current exposure to trauma is going to continue to increase stress response. Just so you know, I'm with a group that talks about and thinks about how to prevent child abuse. And one of the staggering numbers that I recently heard was that our referrals to community agencies are down 50%. And that's in large part due to many of the calls that these community agencies get are from our educators. And our educators, you know, when a student walks in the building, you can see that something is wrong on their face. And without being able to see that and name that and call that out and ask questions, we know that trauma is still happening. We're just not able to report it. So that's certainly a concern and a huge stressor. Folks with pre-existing behavioral health issues or a history of those behavioral health concerns, limited support systems in family, community, and workplace. So people just working in living in unloving homes or working in kind of unloving places can continue to be a stress for people. Feelings of isolation, poor coping skills and supports, et cetera, can also be a stressor. We asked kids yesterday if they felt like more substance abuse was happening among their peers at this time, and luckily they said that they didn't feel like that was the case. So then what can we get? What can schools do? Schools can teach awareness. They can be aware as well. And they can also build resilience in their kids. They can do that through social and emotional learning, which is something that's been spoken about several times today. They also need to be thinking about crisis planning. They need to be looking, listening, and linking. So in terms of looking, if they observe something or hear something that is of a concern, they need to link those concerns to the proper mental health professionals, whether that's in the school, whether that's in the school district, or in those community agencies. And this just gives you a little bit more on that. So when we're looking for practical needs. What are the psychosocial needs of our kids? What are the academic and professional needs of our staff? When we're listening to students and families, we're listening to staff and listening to the community. And then again, we're linking to internal resources, whether that's in the school or the district or those community partners as well.
So part of the reason that we want to think about ways that we can build resilience is that just as every district is going to have unique needs and figure out how to spend all this money that's now going to be available to meet those needs, every student and every staff person is going to have slightly different needs, but there are some basic elements that if they are in place will help build resilience for both students and staff. And so you can apply these components to each group. And these 6 areas: connection, safety, nutrition and exercise, building competence, empowerment, and self-regulation, can really be things that can be integrated into the way that both academics and the school culture and climate are happening, and also to how we're helping and supporting our staff. Next slide, please. So when we think about connection, we know that schools are doing a great job. Teachers, counselors, and other staff are doing a great job with reaching out to students. I want to encourage you to remember to reach out to staff as well, not just our educators, but all of our staff. And that one time reaching out is not really enough, that in order to help create that connection, we may have to do that more, especially if you have people who are experiencing a high level of stress and maybe more withdrawn. It's very helpful sometimes to create a mentoring system or a buddy system. And again, that can happen at a student level. It can also happen at a staff level. It's a way of creating some connection, making sure that people have somebody to check in with, and a way of keeping eyes on everybody in the building to see how people are doing, so that everybody has another pair of eyes on them. We know that things like check-in, check-out with students are going to become increasingly useful when we think about the physical re-entry of students back to school as a way of reconnecting with them and making sure, again, that there are people who have eyes on them. When we think about safety, we want you to be thinking about physical safety for sure, but also about psychological safety. And the way that we promote psychological safety to build resilience is, first of all, to let people know that the stress response that they're having is normal, so that they don't feel like there's something wrong with them. They don't try to hide it or push it down, that they feel comfortable letting somebody know if they need something or if they need help. We, again, go back to our look and our ask and our listen. And in schools, as well as at a professional level, it's really important to model appropriate expression of emotions. One of the things we want to teach kids to do is we want to teach them that you can feel bad and still be in control and regulated. That's one of the tasks that we do at school. And this will probably become even more important. So your social emotional learning content, as well as processes, will have to be a big part of your reentry plan. Obviously, taking care of our bodies is important for both kids and adults, and you can see ways to do that. I think that things like recess and movement breaks are going to need to be an important part of reentry plans. Next slide, please. When we think about building resilience, one of the ways that we can do that is by promoting a sense of competence. And one of the unique things about the COVID-19 coronavirus is that because it is medically novel, we are all feeling this tremendous sense of uncertainty and lack of control. And I think as you start to plan, you're really keenly aware of that. One of the things that we know is very helpful for adults and for youth is to find ways that they can feel a sense of competence and achievement. So part of that can come from continuing to do things that they're already competent at, but part of it also comes from learning new things. However, we also know that because of the stress response, it's hard to learn new things when we're under stress. Our brains are not as open to integrating new knowledge and remembering things. So when you're thinking about planning both academics and social and emotional learning, it's really important to think about breaking this down into small pieces of information, building in opportunities for repetition, knowing that it may take a little bit longer. We also know that targeted affirmation for both our staff and our students is going to be really, really important at this time. Empowerment is also a way that we can build resilience, and the easiest ways to help people feel empowered is to give them a voice and to give them choices. And remembering that just two things is a choice for students, and so sometimes they just need to have an either or choice. It doesn't have to be extensive, but finding ways to make sure that our staff also feels like they're having some choices and a voice, and that there's some flexibility in response to the input that you get from them can be very, very helpful in helping them to feel strong and able to manage what's going on. Our last area of building resilience is in this area of self-regulation. And this has become a big part of school even prior to the pandemic, but I think it's going to be a huge need and something that we really need to think about and plan for when we're thinking about both online lessons as well as support over the summer and reentry. And this is where your SEL, mindful activities, mindful focusing, helping kids to learn how to focus and be present can be extremely helpful for both their emotional well-being and their cognitive and executive functioning. And so there are lots of resources and supports to do that, but it really probably needs to be an important piece of reentry because that's what will help get kids ready to learn and able to learn. Next slide, please. Obviously, you're thinking about crisis plans right now. I want to remind you that when you're doing this crisis planning, that part of what will promote well-being for all of your kids and all of your staff is to make sure that there's input into that planning from all segments of the community, and that will give people a voice and some empowerment. We've talked about the importance of considering SEL and flexibility and culture and climate, and also to really try and promote what's going well and to, even in the face of this uncertainty, find the things that you can hang on to and really celebrate as renewal and hopeful and positive. That goes a long way towards helping promote good, strong mental health. Obviously, we want to help you support your school communities who have experienced some grief and loss, and it's likely that there will have been grief and loss in almost every school community. And there is a document that's available on the KDE website that talks about ways to support school communities virtually if they experience grief and loss at this time. So as we said, all of these things are going to help students be ready to learn and staff be ready to teach despite the ongoing stress. All of this is predicated on the idea of compassion, but it's not just compassion for one another, also self-compassion. And for your staff, that's going to be especially important for them to extend themselves some grace and to be patient with themselves and to realize that there is no way to do this perfectly. This is new for all of us, and we want to be as flexible and as adaptable as possible, but we also know that there will be some times where we're a little bit out of our depth, and that's okay, and to normalize that. One of the ways that we show compassion is we ask what's happening and what's strong with ourselves and with each other rather than what's going wrong. So focusing on the positive. And with that, here's our contact information. So eager for any thoughts, comments, or questions.
You know, this is Ambrose. This question is maybe for both of you, but you know, when school resumes in August, it may be 5 months since the staff, our principals, our teachers, counselors have seen these students, and especially our younger students. There's so much that could have happened in the last 5 months. Mm-hmm. You could have had one or both parents lose their job. You've had family members who have died from COVID-19. You've had family members who are sick and still recovering. You have people who are fearful of getting it. Don't you think you almost have to have some extra personnel at the beginning to help deal with all these things?
So I don't know if it's going to require extra personnel. It certainly is going to require a shift in focus. So I think in some ways what you're saying is that there's no way to get through a day without some of those issues coming up. It's either going to come up in behaviors, or it's going to come out in conversation, or it's going to come up because kids aren't able to focus as much. So that may be a matter of having more personnel, particularly in your younger grades. Or it may be a matter of shifting expectations for how the time is going to be spent initially. And what I mean by that is that it may be that in the beginning, you have to spend some time talking about how people are feeling and building up that sense of, you know, we are safe here. And yes, this is an adjustment, and getting used to being on for 6 hours a day instead of going back and forth into bed, or, you know, other kinds of things. So you're going to have to kind of retrain both bodies and minds of kids. And that's going to take some time. So it may be that academic expectations will have to be shifted down a little bit. What I would say is that I know that there's huge concerns about slide, and I know that that's really an important thing. What we know about how brains respond to stress is that we don't have as much brain capacity in our cognitive functioning areas. So that if the kids are stressed, they're not going to be taking in, even if we're giving them great academic content, they won't be able to take it in and retain it. So to spend a little bit of time to get people settled, just as you would if somebody came back to school, if a student came back to school after, you know, something in their family traumatic that had happened, to give them a little bit more space. That may have to happen at the school level for a little while before everybody can settle down to be able to learn, and it may be worth that investment. Whether, Damien, I'll let you.
Yeah, sorry. I would just add, I think that everything you said is spot on, Miriam. I think school is going to look, it's going to have to look different. I think that our content classes can't just be about content. We can no longer expect there to just be an English class, or just to be a history or a math class. Those classes have to start being with being psychologically supportive. They should infuse social and emotional learning in them, because we know, as you said, that kids aren't going to come ready to learn. You know, that's not going to be their first priority. Their first priority is to want to feel safe, want to feel that sense of community. And I think it's going to be on all of us, not just the mental health practitioners or the school counselors, to be a part of that.
So, for example, one way that might happen might be that we know that regular routine is going to be really, really important, but building into that routine, it may be that every single class starts with a minute or two of some kind of calming activity. Maybe it's just deep breathing, and there's lots of different ways to do this, but that settles the kids when they come in, gets everybody on the same page, helps with transitions, which are always harder when people are stressed. So that, like, class switching time, even if they're not switching in halls, if they're just switching in the classroom, things like that to build in may be what's going to be beneficial. And that wouldn't necessarily require more personnel, but it will require a shifting approach to the schedule.
Okay, this Diana. I've got a question. I've got a question about the difference between, we know there's a difference between how a high school student reacts to things as an elementary and a preschool. My concern is after these students have stayed home with mama and daddy, and we try to get these younger ones, these K through or preschool through, I'd say 4th grade, that's where I'm concerned too, because those students when you see your mama and daddy the whole time, and these people have been furloughed or laid off, and mom's there too, it's bless their hearts, it's going to be really rough. I'm almost with Ambrose about talking about needing extra help, or some kind of parent volunteer, or anyone that's had a health background, mental background, or a nurse or something. I'm concerned about those kids. And high school kids, you've also got the kids that are overly, oh, how am I going to put this one? They're anxious, anxiety, It's just different. And if you've had a child like that, you know there's difference. So what can we do about that?
Do you want me to start, Damien?
Sure.
Okay. So I think for younger kids, well, actually for all kids, I would say that one of the things that would be really important is to start to establish some connections in advance of the time when they come back in the building. So as much as you can do some outreach and connecting between school and home to start to remind kids, especially young kids, but also any child who may be struggling with anxiety, that school is a safe place, that there are people there who care about them, that they mean something as an individual. They're just not one of any number of students, will be very, very helpful. In terms of your younger grades, as you're going back, additional help may in fact be very helpful, and that may be a way that you want to adjust some of that funding or spend some of that funding. But I think that part of that is going to be, the first couple of days are probably, yes, going to be a little bit difficult, but having a really good plan for how to have a very regular schedule. The thing that's going to get kids adapted to being at school is that they know what to expect, that they know what's coming, that they get into a routine. So as quickly as that can be established, especially for these younger kids, that will be very, very beneficial to them. And knowing that they're going to need a lot of constant supervision and guidance. So, to say play on your own is probably not going to be a very useful tack. So there is going to be a lot of hands-on guided work in the very beginning, in some ways very much like how you socialize kids to kindergarten those first few months. They always say it takes 6 to 9 weeks for those new kindergartners to get adapted to that. In that sense, Damien, I'll let you say something now.
I think you did well. I think you got it.
Yeah, I hate to say you absolutely have to hire more people. That may be a solution, but there also may be other things to do, or both.
So, I told you, Diane, and the group, that I'm a resource for school counselors. So one of the things that we're constantly telling our counselors to do in every district all over the state is that they should be making those phone calls. They should be checking in. We've put out information. We just put out this really cool video. We interviewed 5 different elementary school counselors from all over the state, and they basically give advice for how to handle this time, what's working, what they realized was not working, how to communicate with those young children that you're talking about. And what we're doing is we're telling them to constantly be checking in with them. Just like Miriam said, constantly show them that they are cared for, that they have safe adults that are thinking about them, that are outside of the home, that are looking forward to their return. And I loved what you said, Miriam, about just the need to be able to establish that routine as quickly as possible once we return.
I also, I'll tell you that I just made a note, kids follow the lead of their parents, and part of this is actually going to be preparing parents. So I just made a note to myself that the Department for Behavioral Health needs to do a video that comes out prior to school going back in that coaches parents about how to support their kids to get ready back to school. So we'll get some resources ready in that way, and Damien, you and I could work on that. But I think that that's going to be an important piece, because if the parents are leading by being positive and supportive and very proactive about it, that will help the kids.
Look at you, Diane. Good job.
That comment you made about getting parents ready for the beginning of school is so daggone important, because, if their stress is less, if they know what to do to help their students, then the probability of success just accelerates so greatly. But that's something that's something we're going to have to do quickly too.
So here's my promise to you, because Damien and I just love to make work for each other. We're going to come up with a document that can be distributed to parents that called helping prepare your child to return to school. And so that whenever it's time, you guys will have that. And we'll put some suggestions for parents there. And then I'll make a movie at DBH that kind of does it. We can, I'll figure out how we want to do this, but it can be like an example of a parent talking to a child to help them get ready.
And I want to add, you know, I told you I have very young children, but I also come from a high school background. So I told you before, I worked in several high schools here in Louisville, and, you know, just because kids are older doesn't mean they're not going to be experiencing some of the things that we discussed earlier. When I talked about the sleep disturbance, I was really thinking about different high school kids that I had in the back of my mind that I've already heard stories about because they're really concerned about this. So they're going to be struggling with some very different anxieties, but they're still going to be struggling with anxiety about going back to school for sure.
Thank
Damien
you
and
very much.
Miriam, thank you so much for your time today. If folks have additional questions, I know we can certainly pass them along to both of you as we move forward. I'm going to turn it back to Kevin now I know we're getting close to time here, and you guys have asked a lot of questions and shared a lot of your concerns already, but I know other things may have come up as we've been going through these presentations. So Kevin, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for all of the KDE staff, the presenters, Miriam, others, Miriam and Damien, I know, and others. I think this may have been the third time this week you've presented similar information to other advisories. So thank you for that. This has been very valuable to hear the feedback and the questions and concerns from the local board members. So anything else on your mind, concerns? I anticipate I think your next meeting is September 3rd. I'm anticipating maybe a need to bring you back earlier than that, just because of the nature of what we're doing and we're in such an unusual time. I don't know when that will be, other than we'll probably know it when we see it. So you can probably expect an invitation from us at some point this summer. I can tell you the commissioner search is full steam ahead. The search firm for the permanent commissioner is going to appear at the state board meeting tomorrow. Of course, that meeting is online. You're welcome to watch virtually. We had originally hoped to have the permanent commissioner in place by July 1st. We probably can be pretty close to having someone named by then. It's probably going to look more like August 1st or maybe as late as Labor Day as far as getting the person on the ground. So I'll continue to keep you posted there. But I do think we will need to bring you back before I do leave. And just because of the nature of the uncertainty with reopening schools, and, you know, the public health situation kind of changes by the day. You know, yesterday we had a high number of deaths and cases because of, you know, some testing are going on, I think, with one of the correctional facilities. But my point being that, you know, it does change from day to day, week to week. And so we value your feedback as we move through this pandemic. Anything else? We have about 5 minutes.
Commissioner, I just wanted to say very quickly, thank you for putting this together. This has been the most informative advisory meeting that I've been to, and it's been so helpful. And thank you for your service, and thank you for pulling this together. And for all of those who participated, thank you. It was very, very helpful.
Yes, thank you. I agree. Thank you very much.
I think it's been very helpful also.
I agree. It's been one of the best ones I've attended.
Can we get a couple of the presentations sent to us?
Yes, we will have all of the PowerPoints that were utilized. David, you'll be sending those out.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And there will also be a recording of the meeting. So we'll send that out to you once it's ready.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, you could just stay on board there, you know.
Well, you know, I think after having one good crisis under my belt, I'll be ready to go. I'll be, as you all know, I'm going to be heading back to Jefferson County as their general counsel. And I was very clear up front that, when I accepted it that I was not going to be a candidate, and I think that was a very wise thing to demand, because I needed all my attention needs to be on the interim. Didn't know we were going to have this situation. So I've been happy to serve in this capacity, and I can't tell you it's been a pleasure to work with the school districts and your superintendents. I know we all have differences in opinion on issues, and we should have, but it's been truly a team working together at all levels. So I'm really proud of us as a state.
Kevin, you've done a great job so far.
Yes,
You've
sir.
done a wonderful job.
Thank you. Kevin, if you would, please give the folks there in the office, the education office, our thanks. They've been instrumental in us getting to the end of this school year. And I really know that we here in Northern Kentucky appreciate what they've done to help us be successful in keeping the kids on some form of a learning path. So please share with them. I appreciate everything in the presentations you've given us today. So I'm sure the rest of it will say.
And as you all know, as having my dad being a long-serving board member, I know that the sacrifices you all make every day, and the challenging situations you're in just by walking in the grocery store sometimes. And maybe you're glad you got a mask on now.
That's right.
Yes.
So thank you all. If you need us for anything, you know how to reach us, and stay safe.
Okay, you too, Kevin.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.